First of all, I'll just tell you a little bit about my wife and I. My wife, Christy, down here on the front row. We've been doing ministry together for, 20-something years now, hasn't it been? We've been youth pastors, associate pastors, senior pastors. Now we're marriage pastors at Kalamazoo First Assembly, as well as we're doing some itinerating, filling pulpits around the state with churches that don't have pastors. So we love just to speak to people. So that's just a little bit about us, and we'll just continue on from there. Thanksgiving, 1987, a few years ago, if you haven't thought of that. There was a trip that happened that totally changed my life. We were going from ORU in Tulsa, Oklahoma to my hometown at that time of Herrin, Illinois, down in southern Illinois, down around Carbondale, if you ever heard of it. Well, I was riding with a mutual friend, and another person was tagging along, and had no conversation. But on the way back to school, started talking, and this lovely lady from Northeast Colorado was riding along, and I spent Thanksgiving with this other friend, and you know what? I thought she was kind of cute, and kind of piqued my interest. Well, let me tell you what was on the radio that time of the year. You know, some of you might be children of the 80s. Some of these might come to mind. Is This Love by Whitesnake. The Way You Make Me Feel, Michael Jackson. We'll Be Together, Sting. I've Had the Time of My Life, Bill Medley. And most importantly, I've Got My Mind Set on You, George Harrison. So anyway, so needless to say, as we got to talking, she caught my interest, and my mind, it kind of stuck. And by the time we made it back to ORU, I decided to ask her out for a date, and we went out the following weekend to see Kenny Marks in concert. And you know, it was a pursuit, and that pursuit began. I wanted to get to know this young lady, and I didn't know where it was going to take us and what was going to happen in that pursuit. The pursuit took a different turn, or a more serious turn, in July the following year, when my parents and I were going to go out to Colorado for a vacation, and her parents were like, well, why don't they just stop by here? And then, needless to say, we ended up spending our vacation with Christy and her family. And but it was at that trip that I just let her know, I want to take this further than just a casual relationship. I want to cement this into becoming, if the Lord allowed, actually, that we would move into. So I gave her a promise ring. And so then, a month and a half later, I cemented that by giving her an engagement ring when we got back to ORU. And the thing is, okay, you ever plan something and you have to adopt your plan because something else changed it? I had this wonderful idea. Tulsa, Oklahoma, it's a warm down there, but they have a beautiful downtown. All the sky, lights up in all the tall buildings. And they had horse and carriages that you could go down. So I had packed a backpack. I had non-alcoholic wine. I had the ring. I had all of these things ready. So we go out to dinner, and the biggest thunderstorm in the south hit us. And it was torrential, downpouring. And it was not stopping for hours. So here we are sitting at Olive Garden, and I'm like, well, this is not the place I intended to ask you, but it still means the same. Will you be my bride? So, then the pursuit from that level on became, planning for a wedding. And a day short of a year, the same weekend that we had gotten engaged, we got married the next summer. And, next week we will celebrate our 30th anniversary. And so, but one of the things that was very fascinating, when we got done, you went through all the pomp, the circumstance, the wedding dress, and the tuxes. We did all those things. We had a barbecue. Her dad was a hog farmer, so we had fresh pork barbecue back at their house. It was a great time, but when we got alone and we got to where we went away from everyone, we literally stopped, and one thing we asked, we just sat down together and we just prayed and asked God, from this day forward, we both had made Jesus our Lord, but we asked him to be Lord of our marriage. And we just asked him to always be present, that we didn't just make that oath to each other, but we made a promise to God. and that we were taking that seriously. And so today I want to talk about a life in pursuit, putting love in action. If you are married, I hope this is an encouragement to you. If you're single and you would like to be married, I hope this is also an encouragement to you. If you have no desire to be married, listen along. You might know somebody that is, and you can bless them with it. But one of the things, coming off of what you guys talked about the last few weeks, is that the basis for us to be able to act in love is that we have to continue that action of loving God and loving each other. That we continue in that, I'm going to love the Lord my God with all my heart, my soul, my strength, my mind, and love my neighbor as myself. But let me ask you, as a married couple, who is your closest neighbor? Not a trick question. It should be your spouse. You think about that. That is my closest neighbor. Am I taking that time to continually, to actively and lovingly pursue them? I know when her, the idea of being with her caught my eye, I began a pursuit. And I continued that pursuit. And she said I could. And so I continued that pursuit until she said, until we stood together and we pledged together to be married. But you know what? The pursuit doesn't stop there. We go through situations. Life throws things at us. And during those times of trials, during times of tests, or even times of joy, you find out different things in each other that you can pull on, and you can encourage them to develop certain skills. But also, if they're weak in an area, you can come alongside and realize some things hurt. Some things, it's hard. And you might not have an answer other than, I'm here for you. And that's as deep as that you can be at that moment. But that's part of love, and that's that loving our neighbor as ourselves. Ecclesiastes says it this way in Ecclesiastes 4:9. It says, 2 are better than one because they have good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. And so often that's, I feel sorry for people that don't have somebody when they're in a tough situation, to have somebody that can help build them up. Because it says, pity anyone who falls and there's no one to help them up. Then a lot of times in weddings, people use the verse 12 there. It says, though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves, but a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And a lot of times we talk about that third cord being Jesus, and that we're wrapped and entwined in him, and that strengthens our bond. But, loving God, loving our neighbor, it starts at home. It starts between us and our spouses. It starts between us and our kids. And then it goes from there, everywhere we go. You see, marriage was not something that man came up with. It wasn't just something that they decided one day, let's be married. God was the one that designed it from the very beginning. And we see back in Genesis 2, you read the story that the Lord had said, it's not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable to him. And then it goes through, and then Adam names all the animals. And then it says, but there was not one suitable for him. There was not one found. It says, so the Lord caused man to fall into a deep sleep. And he says he took one of man's ribs and closed up the place with the flesh. And then the Lord made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. Does anybody else have that song, Matchmaker, Matchmaker? Now you will. When you read that, here's the first matchmaker. The Lord brought to him the perfect helpmeet. Someone called alongside to be a blessing to him. And together they would begin to populate the earth. And man said, this is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She will be called woman, for she was taken out of man. And it says, for this reason, man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. They will be united in purpose. I know last week, Pastor Paul, that was what he talked about, was in unity. Well, where's the best place to show unity is in our homes. That we are taking the things that God is doing in us, and we're walking them out together. Building upon that and being an example so that when people see us as a couple, they see us as a family, they say there's something different there. How can you be so happy when this is going on? Well, we have each other. We're not depending upon our jobs to make us happy. We're not depending upon the car we drive just to bring us joy. We're depending upon the Lord. And together we're growing in Him and we're growing with each other. Being honest with each other. Proverbs 18:22 tells us, he who finds a wife finds what is good. Amen. I found something very good. I'm very pleased. No exchanges, no refunds. It's awesome. I don't need that. I got a good wife. And it says receives favor from the Lord. You know, it's amazing how people sometimes, well, I think that person's cute. Well, let's get married. And they have no idea who that person is, and they never take the time. And you see sometimes in society, we have the revolving door. And that's one of the things I know when we've sat down with couples to try and do premarital counseling with them is why? What is it about that person that's attractive? What is it? How is their relationship with God? And especially if they're church-going people, you want to know that answer. Because if they don't have a clue, well, hold on. Let's let's put the brakes on. Let's stop for a minute. If you don't know a basic thing of when did they accept Christ? How is their relationship with Christ? That's a foundation. And so for that love to be built and for trust to be built, there has to be something to build upon. We realize that to have that relationship, it is going to take a building process, but it has to be based upon love. Do you know, sometimes it's hard to love when you wake up and you didn't sleep well, when the kids woke you up, when the dogs, both of our children are adults, they live on their own, we have dogs. I will be thankful when we no longer have dogs. One of them was my son's dog and one is my wife's dog. But they start in about 5:30 every morning. Just a little yip, a little bark, more barks. Till finally you get out of bed and you let them out. And then they want to crawl in your bed and go back to sleep. And of course you can't because they're trying to take the space you are laying in. But that is when your love is tested. When you haven't got the sleep you wanted, when the thunderstorm comes in the middle of the night and the kids run to your bed, whatever it is, and you start realizing, even when things are not perfect, you still have something to cling to, something to build upon. And it takes agreement. You might not see things eye to eye all the time. My wife I would consider her a top 40 style music lover. I go from country, classical to heavy metal, and everywhere in between. I just love a plethora. Well, we've learned to disagree that she doesn't care for, Stryper or some of the other bands that I like, and I don't. I let her listen to whatever she wants to, her Michael Bublé or whatever she has on. Okay, that's fine, but give me something with a little bit more pizzazz. Anyway, but from the very beginning, though, we knew that there were certain things that were different, and we wanted to champion each other to still keep some of those differences. My wife is a seamstress. I'm not. And I love the things that she can create with her hands and the time, the details she puts into those things. I'm going to champion that all the time because you know what? I don't really think I'm going to pick up a sewing needle or get the sewing machine. But she thrives on doing those things. But I, on the other hand, will go to the kitchen and I will spend hours baking and creating different things and cooking. And I love doing those things with my hands. We both have gifts and we've learned to appreciate what each one has. It doesn't mean I expect her to do everything the way I do it in the kitchen because she does it different. She's kind of like, let's just fix some food and let's eat. I'm kind of like, let's create a masterpiece. Different people, right? But Amos 3:3 says, can two walk together unless they are agreed? It's a decision we make. Love is a decision that when the person doesn't always see things the same way, we still choose to love. Or maybe they said something and they were frustrated. That we take the time to find out why did you say that? And it's not that you're trying to cause strife. You want to know because you want to repair. And if there's something that needs to be dealt with, deal with those things. But if there's not, maybe it's just they need to express themselves. They need to allow for their differences to be shared, that they might feel like they are not being heard or whatever. In 1 Corinthians 13, we often use this, and it's amazing because it's put in between, talking about God's spiritual gifts and us flowing in the Spirit, and then it's sandwiched with, in the middle of it is the cream filling is love. And that whether it's in serving in the body of Christ or serving in our spouses in our homes, love is the foundation that cements everything together. And love takes time. If somebody just looks at somebody and says, "Oh, I love them," I doubt it. You're attracted, but true love takes time to know that person. Love is patient and love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It's not rude. You know how many couples that we have seen through the years that struggle, they're just rude to one another. And they're they're laughing it off. And it's like, that's just plain rude. This is your spouse. This is the person you've chosen to spend your life with. Don't treat them like they don't matter. This is this is the person that helps complete or comes alongside and you're supposed to be one flesh with. And if we're talking down to our spouses, we're saying, I don't think enough of you to be considered alongside me. I don't know, I'm meddling a little bit there, but it's not rude. It's not self-seeking. In our life, it's not just all about you as a couple. It's the two of you together. And if you have kids, that has a whole nother level, that it's not just you. I know when our kids were growing up, it was fun. We were pastoring a church and we had kids in sports and in high school and you're trying to get them everywhere. And what can you do? What can't they do? And it's like, okay, and we had to sit down as a family and lay down what we were going to do and what we weren't based upon schedules. You can do one thing, but you can't do 3 things at each semester or whatever. And but it wasn't that just because I didn't want to go to them. This will drive us all nuts. And we needed to have family time. We had family dinner. We sat down and had dinner with our kids. And it was amazing how many friends that our kids knew that they never sat down with their families. They grabbed something and go to their room. They go to the TV, or everybody just kind of went and did their own thing. There was no conversation. And it was amazing. People would come there like, your family's so different. Well, we want to find out what's going on, and we'd talk, and I want to deal with the tough situations that were happening. It's not easily angered. It's amazing how angry we get because we're self-seeking. I don't get it my way, so now I'm mad. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with truth. But this is where, for us as couples, it always protects. We have our spouse's back. She's not your old lady. He's not your old man. He's not your ball and chain. This is your spouse. This is your one flesh. Guard that. Protect that. Don't allow somebody else to come in and try and separate that. It always hopes. It hopes for the future. It relishes in the joys of the past, but it looks for the next day. It always perseveres. Love never fails. I'm going through a situation right now that in the next 2 weeks I'll be taking a trip to Florida because my father has to have open heart surgery. And last year my wife had to make the same trip for her dad out to Colorado. It's so amazing to see families, that both, we've been blessed that both of our parents were Christians growing up, and through those things they've trusted God. But you start looking and seeing the things, even like what I've been watching the last couple of weeks with my mom. She's had some things, some health concerns as well, but her focus has been so on Dad that she wasn't always seeing, And finally, Dad's like, you've got to take care of yourself too. And how that even in the midst of them going through those tough situations, they took time to listen and to make sure both people were taken care of. And that's part of, I've learned and saw that love. That's why I'm going down, because I still love my parents and honor them. And it's not convenient. It never is. But it's part of love is you step out of what's convenient and you get involved even in the pain of the situation. Our marriage relationship, it's something that should be protected and it should be honored. It should be something that we take time for it. How many of you have hobbies? Anybody have hobbies around here? We could all talk. We probably all have a lot of different hobbies. But do we take time and do our hobbies? Usually we find some way to sneak some time for it. But do we take that time to continue to invest in the relationship we have as husband and wife? Now, the scripture tells us that, and we use this a lot of time in marriages, is, Matthew 19:5-6, it says, "For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother, be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man separate." Or let not man separate. Well, a lot of times we think of that as protect it from the outside. But I like to tell couples when I'm counseling them, look from the inside. Don't be the person that divides each other apart. If you're saying we believe God has brought us together, then do everything in your power to protect that and to build for the future. We should do everything we can to keep purity in that relationship. Don't allow things of this world to come in and pollute what God has blessed. Marriage. Hebrews 13:4 says, "Marriage is honorable in all, and the bed is undefiled. But fornicators and adulterers God will judge." Don't bring in things that has no business. I don't care if the world calls it entertainment. It's garbage. Leave it out. Enjoy one another. Enjoy that time. Honor one another. Proverbs 5 tells us, drink water from your own cistern and running water from your own well. Should your fountains be dispersed abroad and streams of water in the streets, let them be only your own and not for strangers with you. Keep things in that belongs there. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice with the wife of your youth. Let's take time and honor one another and it might be one of those things that you have to set us, especially if you have young children. We used to set bedtime just so that we could have time just to talk uninterrupted. It's like, you know what? We need to be able to talk. It's time for you to go to bed. But not only that, we need to honor and be committed to the vows that we spoke. For some of us, it may have just been simple. Others, people write these dissertations, but it was something similar to this. This is one a lot of couples have used, that when I have a list of vows, I collect. That's kind of weird. I collect vows. What people use in weddings, and then give people choices so that when they want to customize their marriage ceremony. But it's I take you to be my lawful wedded spouse, my closest friend, my faithful partner in life, my one true love. On this special day, I give you my sacred promise to stay by your side as your faithful spouse in sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, through the good times and bad. I promise to love you without reservation, honor and respect you, provide for your needs as best I can, comfort you in times of distress, and cherish you for as long as we both shall live. That's something when I get to do a wedding, I'm always constantly looking back. Well, how are you doing with those? Just in my relationship. And sometimes I'm doing okay. Other times, I might need a little bit of work on it. Just because I'm allowing other things to cause there to be a little bit of a wedge. You know, in Ecclesiastes, it talks about that we need to watch our words. And if you've made a vow, you've made that vow not just to your spouse, you've made it before God. And it says in Ecclesiastes 5 verse 4, it says, when you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it. He has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. If you're not going to honor your vow, God says you're a fool. Why are you doing this? You've made a covenant. It means more than just having a wonderful day where everybody looked nice. Verse 5 says, it is better not to make a vow than to make one and not fulfill it. So in our life, we each have choices. But you know, one of the things that so often we can get into it, we want what we want. And we're not always, there's things that we desire or we want to see out of the relationship. And one of the things we sat down with, we took a marriage in the family class while we were at Oral Roberts University. And there were things that they encouraged us to sit down and write some things out. The desires, different things. And one of the things that I wrote down on mine, which had nothing, I would say had nothing to do, but it did. I wrote something down and we talked about it. And one of the things was, I knew I was called to the ministry. And that was where I felt my life was headed. And so when we sat down, I was like, I'm going to tell you this, and I don't need you to answer it today, but if we continue down this path, at some point you have to say, if you don't say yes to this, then we're not going forward. And I just said, I feel called to the ministry. Now, can you live with a man that's called to be a minister? And thankfully she said yes. But it was one of those hard subjects of, we wanted to be honest and with each other so that when I didn't want to get into a church and then she says, I hate this, I don't want, because I've seen that happen, where they were going two different ways. And I didn't sign up to be a pastor's wife, or I didn't sign up to be, worship leader's husband or whatever. People get all, and we had to just guard ourselves and to be honest with one another. But with that, we take time for the emotional and the physical needs and the affection that each one desires. For some, they just need to hear a simple word, I love you. Others, it might be flowers. Others, it might be giving them a night off. And you take care of the kids, or whatever it is. But in 1 Corinthians 7, verse 3, it says, let the husband render to his wife the affection due her, and likewise also the wife to her husband. So often we think of affection just as, physical things, the kissing, the hugging, but sometimes it's the sitting down and being thoughtful about how we're going to show that affection towards one another. And yes, there are benefits that come with being husband and wife. That there is that joy of being able to be together intimately. And even with that, the scripture is very interesting here. It says, that we should not deprive one another except for a consent for a time. Maybe there's something going on and you're having to go through some changes. But be open and be honest with one another through those things. But then it says that come together again so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. Be honest, but be listening so that you don't open the door for the enemy to bring temptation or thoughts into your marriage. Ephesians 5 tells us this, that we should walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. I tell you, we have to redeem that time, enjoy our time, but build upon that relationship. Our lifetime is only so long, and the world needs to see believers living a godly life, to see marriages that can last. Verse 17 says, but do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. His will is if we enter into covenant, we honor that covenant. And that we bring, he's the one that started this way back in the beginning. But one of the things there in verse 21, he says, submit to one another in the fear of God. Realizing this is something we're going at this together. For it to succeed, we can't be fighting. We have to be enjoying. We have to be listening. We have to be building. So that God gets the glory through this time. So often, people, I've heard verse 22 slammed on so many people I will call them egotistical men. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. But they skip that verse right before of submit to one another. This is a union to become one flesh. Not to be domineering over the other, but coming together and walking together in our service to the Lord. But it's also, verse 25 is very humbling, at least for me. It says, husband, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of the water of the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. So husbands ought to love their own wives as their own bodies. You think about that, how much Christ has loved us. Now, think of that. Now think of husbands, how you're treating your wife. All of us got some work to do. We are doing our best. But you know what? There's room for improvement. This pursuit continues. And I want to, even in myself, look at the mirror and say, there's still areas God is doing a work on me. And it's not done yet. And he's doing a work in her. And it's not done yet. Let's continue this journey together. And I'm going to do everything I can to propel you to be the woman that God has created you to be. And she's trying to do the same thing, encouraging me that I would become the husband that God has called me to be. So for each of us, walking through marriage, it is a time that we're truly walking out that loving God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, but particularly loving that neighbor, our closest neighbor, as ourselves. So for some of us, we may need a refresher course. Maybe going back, just refreshing your mind about those vows, but maybe it's some things that you can do to build, re-spark the things in your relationship. Maybe it's simple as sending a compliment to your wife or your husband. Take simple needs that they might have. Maybe your husband needs socks. Go buy him a pair of socks, but then put a note with it. You know, every time you go somewhere, as you put these socks on, you'll think of me. I don't know. But making it something that, just think creatively. Having a date night at home. It doesn't have to be out. The kids are going to bed, or maybe you send them to grandparents' house. But then you just sit and just plan out an entire evening. This one I thought was really good. I read this yesterday. Kidnap your spouse. So of course, it takes a little bit of planning, but coordinate with your spouse's boss, and you get them to give them some time off, and you show up, bags packed, you just go and you take them, and they have no idea where you're going, but you have the entire trip planned. And you kidnap them for a night, a day, whatever it is. How about just, scheduling that time to be together? Scheduling a weekly date, whether that's just a walk down the street to the corner and back, but just that time that's uninterrupted so that you can express that love towards each other. How about, in this day and age, texting one another? Hey, thinking about you. How's your day going? Asking questions, trying to find out what's going on. How about this? Giving your spouse alone time to do that hobby, to do something that because you know it brings them great joy to be able to do those things. And that then you come back and then you can enjoy, and you see that joy on their face. Or you just say, I'll take care of the kids. I'll take care of the dishes. Why don't you go do such and such? How about praying together? When you see that your spouse is struggling, take the time to say, let's pray right now. We're walking through a situation with a family member, several family members, but our brother-in-law is currently in the hospital, and we're just believing God for a miracle. But it's walking through that with a sister, and they're in Colorado, and doctors haven't been able to find the source of the situation. But together, we've just been praying. That's all we can do to comfort one another through this. Just trust God. How about this? Joining them in their hobby. Maybe one of them is a baker, the other's not. How about getting together in there and trying to trade flour around? And it can get it quite interesting sometimes. It's kind of like when you allow kids to help you at Christmas to bake cookies. And you have cookies that look really nice and the ones that were helped with. Anyway. Go out, have your normal night, but take your spouse to get a quick dessert somewhere. How about complimenting your spouse in front of her friends or his friends? Taking time to build upon what you've said, I've committed to. So that when people see you in public, they say, they truly love each other. I love going places and you see that real old couple that, you're like, wow, they actually drove here. But you see them get to the restaurant. I mean, they go and they have that corner spot. I've seen this a few times at Marjo's, but there'll be these couples that they'll go to town, and he'll go over and he'll pull her chair out, and she sits down, and they just sit there, and they don't say a whole lot, but it's just they're taking that time together. And you can see they truly have spent a lifetime loving each other. And it's just so sweet to see that. And I wonder sometimes if people are watching us, are they seeing that same sweetness? I don't want to wait till I'm that old man with my walker and I am 50 now, but at least I just say I just got broke in. That's what I'm saying. But for us as couples, the Lord promises if we honor those things, if we love God and we love our neighbor, He's going to bless us. He's going to honor us. And a lot of times when I do a wedding, I love to end with this particular blessing to speak, because I want to encourage couples as they go forth. As you walk it out, God will meet you where you're going. It says in Deuteronomy 28, it says, if you fully obey the Lord your God and carefully follow all of His commands I give you today, the Lord your God will set you high above all the nations on the earth. All these blessings will come upon you and accompany you if you obey the Lord your God. You'll be blessed in the city and blessed in the country. The fruit of your womb will be blessed, in the crops of your land, and the young of your livestock, the calves of your herds, and the lambs of your flocks. Your basket and your kneading trough will be blessed. You will be blessed when you come in and blessed when you go out. The Lord will grant that the enemies who rise up against you will be defeated before you. They will come at you from one direction, but flee from you in seven. The Lord will send a blessing on your barns and on everything you put your hand to. The Lord your God will bless you in the land He is giving you. He has given us great things. And if we have a spouse, we're in a promised land of our own that God has given us. Let's be sure to protect that. Let's not allow things that the enemy wants to come in to cause separation. Let's guard that. But let's also share that blessing in our kids, in other people. There might be other couples that God puts on your heart that you know that they're struggling. And you just begin to spend time and just invest into their life, letting them know and see God can turn situations around. God can bring deliverance, that He is the one that sets us free. He is the one that saves. He is the one that delivers. So as we go from here, I hope that we do take that idea of let's love God, but let's love our close neighbors. Lord,